Particularly in the genre of sci-fi, where fans want innovation and originality and studios want reliable returns on their investment, almost every film release contains within its development the shadow of a stranger, more daring concept. In some cases, it's just as well these quirky pitches were lost to time, as they would have been laughable on screen. But just as often, there are masterpieces out there which we never got to see. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 12 alternative versions of sci-fi movies we didn't get to see. Number 12, Heath Ledger as Mad Max in Fury Road. George Miller spent decades trying to get a fourth installment of his most beloved creation, the Mad Max franchise, off the ground. Given how much the auteur struggled to find funding, there were inevitably a couple of necessary rewrites by the time shooting began. Despite Mel Gibson's uneven relationship with fame in the intervening years, Miller had harboured hopes that the Lethal Weapon star would return to the role which made him famous. However, advancing age and a busy career as a director put an end to that notion. Miller drafted Heath Ledger as his replacement in the central role of the eponymous outlaw, but the actor's untimely passing prompted the casting of fellow Batman baddie Tom Hardy. The film was also intended to be set between the original trilogy's first and second installments, but the idea was scrapped, presumably because it wouldn't make much sense to shoot a mid-story installment with a whole new cast. Number 11, Michael Chabon's SpiderMan 2. There's a name you'd never expect to see attached to Sam Raimi's campy Spider-Man series. Nevertheless, it seems that Pulitzer Prize-winning author Michael Chabon, hot off the crossover success of his literary novel The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, was given a shot at scripting Raimi's Spider-Man sequel, and the version he conjured up is unrecognizable, to say the least. First of all, Doc Ock isn't as troubled by his transformation, actively enjoying both the powers and the pain which come with them. He's also a love interest of Mary Jane's, and so there's a rival for her affections between him and Peter, with that love triangle between them making up the bulk of the story. However, when this version of Doc Ock murders two muggers on a date with MJ, she turns on him, and thus the Harry Osborn-Doc Ock alliance seen in the version of Spider-Man 2 that we all know and love comes about. Number 10, Shin Godzilla. 2016's Shin Godzilla was seen by many as a triumphant return to form for the long-running, 29 flicks and counting not including Western iterations, Godzilla franchise. The film prioritised both some vintage monster action and the attendant, very serious political commentary that the series is best known for balancing, and did a formidable job of doing the eponymous kaiju justice. However, earlier versions of the franchise reboot would have seen a very different version of Godzilla plague Tokyo, with the titular beast's third transformation chucking up an entire steaming lake of blood and slithering snake-like throughout the city. He also almost boasted a second head, and the stray spikes discovered by workers were originally going to be an undulating blob of assorted teeth, muscle, and organs, which owed more to Rick and Morty's Cronenberg's or Lovecraft than the usual mutant monster movie fare. Number 9, Pitch Black. David Tui's dark, literally and figuratively, sci-fi horror Pitch Black saw the director pay homage to the Alien franchise with the story of shadowy, toothy space monsters tearing their way through an underprepared crew of toughs. However, years before the Vin Diesel vehicle was released, an earlier draft of the script written by Nightmare on Elm Street 4 scribes Jim and Ken Wheat diverged from the eventual Tui film and would have seen the flick hew far closer to its inspiration. In the original draft, the convict protagonist was a biologically enhanced warrior woman, a Ripley-esque heroine whose presence would have changed the dynamic of the strange group of survivors, and the monsters were ghosts rather than aliens. This element was dropped by Tui, who had worked on an abandoned draft of Alien 3 and wanted a chance to explore new material, and hence Riddick was born. Number 8, 007 stars in Cronenberg's The Fly. First of all, it needs to be noted that executive producer Mel Brooks wanted future 007 Pierce Brosnan playing the central role of Seth Brundle in David Cronenberg's gruesome body horror about an overly ambitious scientist whose experimentation proves the cause of his downfall. With that insane suggestion out of the way, it's worth noting how different the film's original script was, and how much more it owed to the 1958 original it was originally intended to be a remake of. Cronenberg's version is an in-name only remake, diverging completely from the corny original, but this wasn't always the case. Amongst the jettisoned elements were a meddling boss who tried to steal Brundle's teleporter, and a climactic scene of the now flying Brundle storming his old office to destroy the teleporter and get his revenge. Probably just as well we didn't see this one then. Number 7. Arnie's I Am Legend. This one is particularly infamous for swapping out its daring original ending in favour of one which conformed to audience expectations at the cost of character and story. But the troubled production of 2007's action horror Will Smith vehicle reveals that the film was in trouble long before the pivotal twist was removed in favour of an explosion. In its initial form, I Am Legend would have starred Arnie, or possibly Mel Gibson at one point, and been directed by Alien Helmer sci-fi horror hero Ridley Scott. However, Scott's vision proved too expensive, and the studio worried about attaching a big budget to a film described as a somber mix of sci-fi and psychological horror, with a dialogue-free opening hour. Hence, we got the sanitized Smith version, complete with a corny self-sacrifice ending and unconvincing monsters, which fumbled the story's central theme by reducing its villains to a brainless horde rather than the thinking, feeling, fearing infected of the original novel. Number 6. Chris Columbus's Planet of the Apes, and Adam Rifkin's and Peter Jackson's, etc, etc. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes is probably still the divisive director's most maligned work, and it's easy to see why. Straying both from his comfort zone of funny, scary, subverted American Gothic and the original film's clever but simple story, Burton overloaded the flick with Byzantine twists and unnecessary exposition. However, it's easy to see how when you cast a glance over just how many iterations of the film were proposed. There was Home Alone director Chris Columbus's family-friendly version, which stuck to the original source novel, Adam Rifkin's Spartacus-style story of a human rebel going against the ape society, and even Peter Jackson's version, with the Lord of the Rings Helmer trying his hand at a story of, we're not joking, an ape Da Vinci who sheltered a human-ape hybrid from the simian takeover. Poor Marky Mark's performance isn't looking so laughable now, is it? Number 5. The meaner Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The 2011 reboot of the Planet of the Apes franchise was pretty well regarded upon release, with its surprisingly poignant handling of Alzheimer's disease via John Lithgow's aging patriarch and the central performances from Frida Pinto and James Franco masking what eventually became an apocalyptic eco-thriller. The film was almost very different though, having begun life as Genesis, a story of an evil chimp who is genetically modified to become hyper-intelligent. In this version of the film, which was never originally written as part of the Planet of the Apes franchise, the Franco equivalent was searching for a cure to his wife's Alzheimer's rather than his father's. There was also a Jetsons subplot about the evil chimp's love interest, but this one would at least go on to appear in truncated form via the film's sequel, 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Number 4. Michael Chabon's Fantastic Four. Believe it or not, it's another appearance for the celebrated highbrow literary fiction author Michael Chabon. Apparently, a Pulitzer was all you needed to become the hottest property amongst comic book adaptations circa 2003. In this instance, Chabon was hired to create a Fantastic Four film which would eventually go on to become the 2005 iteration of the franchise. But his ideas were even more out there than Chronicle creator Josh Trank's infamous 2015 version of the material. Chabon's take was set around the time of JFK's assassination and saw Doom travel to the past in order to assassinate a world leader, presumably not JFK himself, and install himself as a dictatorial ruler. So about 1,000,000 miles from the eventual Chris Evans Jessica Alba movie we got then. Number 3. A Darker Logan where he somehow lives. James Mangold's swan song for the Hugh Jackman version of Wolverine, one of cinema's most loved and longest-lasting superheroes, needed to change a lot of its source material. Wanted scribe Mark Millar's uber-bleak and gory Old Man Logan was too brutal to become the elegiac hard R adventure we saw in 2017, necessitating all manner of changes before production began. For one thing, Sabretooth and Magneto's actors Liev Schreiber and Ian McKellen both expressed interest in an appearance which never came to be, whilst Drive's musical mastermind Cliff Martinez was originally drafted to provide a presumably far synthier score. Meanwhile, the Westchester incident, only obliquely referenced in the film proper, almost saw Wolverine killing off scores of civilians and his fellow X-Men on screen, a pretty hard fall to come back from in the eyes of the audience. Number 2. Alien 3, The Wooden Planet Mad Monks Remix. It seems like everyone and their mother tried their hand at the third installment of the Alien series, and the only thing agreed upon en masse is that David Fincher's eventual bleak 1990 entry into the franchise could have been far better, no matter which of the alternative concepts the creators went with. Sorry, Dave. There was William Gibson's ambitious script, which we have discussed at length before here at What Culture. But Vincent Ward created another equally strange and immersive vision for the future which deserves to be spotlighted. The spec script had a wooden planet which was home to fanatical monks as its setting, wherein a stranded Ripley would have to win over the paranoid zealots, who presume she's an agent of the devil, which is exactly who they think the titular xenomorph is. Eventually culminating in Ripley getting CPR to rid her of a chestburster, very little of this bonkers script made its way to the finished film, and it's hard to watch the flick without wondering what visions of monk communes versus aliens we missed out on. Number 1. Robert Rodriguez's Predators. In 1996, Robert Rodriguez, fresh from the success of Desperado, was one of Hollywood's hottest properties. The Spy Kids helmet was on his way to releasing From Dusk Till Dawn, his genre-defying collaboration with Tarantino. He'd also created a treatment for Predators, the forthcoming third installment of the Predator franchise, which had to be seen to be believed. But we're not talking about the 2010 Predators starring Adrian Brody. No, we mean the original version of that Stranded on Predator Planet sequel, a spec script from Rodriguez which, among other changes from Nimrod Untiled's eventual film, saw the triumphant return of Arnie's Dutch, interspecies dogfights in the Predators' gladiatorial arenas, scores more Predators than any film before or since, some of whom would work with the human soldier characters, and the first appearance of the mythical Predator King. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.